Hi, I'm Jeffrey Smith. Our Institute for Responsible Technology is happy to present this abridged version of Genetic Roulette, the Gamble of Our Lives. Those who have seen the full-length version have been awakened to the real dangers that GMOs present, and many have been inspired to take action. If you'd like to stay in touch with us, please subscribe to the newsletter Spilling the Beans. If you want to become a non-GMO advocate in your area, join our Tipping Point network, and please make a contribution so that we can continue to work to reclaim a healthier non-GMO food supply. What does IRT do? We reach millions of people. We created this film and the full-length version. We gave over 100 live presentations in 2012 and interviews to more than 165 press organizations. We produced numerous short videos and other educational materials. In 2013, we're going to help the 30 states that want ballot initiatives or labeling bills in their area, and we're working with other countries where we have a very big impact. Last year, for example, in Taiwan, when I testified there before the Congress, a senior congressional leader said, based on your information, we need to revamp all the laws in the country on GMOs because they're not sufficient to handle the risks. IRT's supporter base has always been individuals making contributions to help us do what we do. Please make a contribution today. Safe eating.
America. Bountiful. Innovative. Entrepreneurial. Diverse. Progressive. Sick? Americans get sick more often than Europeans and people in other industrialized countries, and they're getting sicker. Since the mid-90s, the number of Americans suffering from at least 3 chronic illnesses nearly doubled, and America's international ranking for infant mortality and lifespan also plunged. There are many reasons why this is taking place. One may be right in front of you.
Over the past 20 years, there's been an almost logarithmic increase in a whole series of chronic illnesses.
The things we're seeing today aren't normal. We didn't see them 30 years ago or 50 years ago.
Illnesses that weren't epidemic before are now epidemic. And at a scale it is just monumental.
People are getting sicker. What's changed? Well, one thing that's changed is the food. And the most radical change is the genetic engineering of our food supply.
We have gone from food in its whole food form to food undergoing a scientific experiment.
We have hundreds of millions of acres of genetically modified crops that have been planted in the United States, and yet most people are not aware.
Obama's USDA is owned by the biotech just as much as every previous administration. And if we don't do anything, like within a decade, every single major crop with any significant market size is going to be genetically modified, and we're not going to know it.
GMO, genetically modified organisms. They take genes from one species and force it into the DNA of other species. And they can mix and match between species that have never normally mated. So they have spider genes that they put into goats in the hopes that they can milk the goat to get spiderweb protein to make bulletproof vests. I'm not making this up. They've taken cow genes and put them into pigs so that the pigs have cowhides. They've taken human genes and put it into corn to make spermicide. And for the food we eat, there's 2 main categories. The herbicide-tolerant crops, they can spray them with herbicide and not kill them, or the pesticide-producing crops that produce their own toxic insecticide that if a bug bites those plants, it breaks open the stomach and kills them. So they're completely swapping genes between the normal species barriers, creating new organisms that were not part of the evolutionary process.
The general public has the impression that genetic engineering is somehow a precise science. More accurately, it's submicroscopic shooting from the hip.
The very process of genetic engineering creates unpredicted side effects. You take a gene and make millions of copies, and then put them in a gun, literally, and then shoot that gun into a plate of millions of cells. And then you clone those cells into a plant.
Typically what they will put onto that is a virus or a part of a virus in order to turn that gene on.
Now, the process of insertion plus cloning creates massive collateral damage. There can be hundreds or thousands of mutations up and down the DNA, and hundreds or thousands of genes can change their levels of expression in the naturally functioning plant. This creates unpredicted side effects.
From a biophysics perspective, when we look at the signature now of that entire gene sequence, it's foreign. It does not exist anywhere in nature. And therefore our immune system, which is truly a grand electromagnetic sensor system, looks at that material, that gene sequence that is supposed to be food, whether it's soy or corn or whatever it might be, looks at that and says, I've never seen that sequence ever. It doesn't exist in nature. It's foreign. It attacks. It creates an inflammatory reaction and attacks that sequence.
Many of the diseases that we deal with, in fact, most of the diseases that we deal with, have as a source inflammation. Many of them, the source is inflammation in the gut, which is, of course, the first interface between the body and any kind of food, including GMO food.
In 1996, genetically engineered soy and corn were introduced into the American diet. Since then, numerous digestive disorders related to gut inflammation have been on the rise in the U.S. population. Is this just a coincidence? But inflammation creates additional serious disorders unrelated to digestion.
So I think we should probably look at allergies. I'm sure we should look at autoimmune diseases and, basically anything that's related to inflammation. Heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, it doesn't stop. Thyroid disease.
The current FDA policy on GMOs, created in 1992, says that the agency is not aware of any information showing that GMOs are significantly different. Therefore, no safety studies are necessary. It turns out that in 1998, a lawsuit forced 44,000 secret internal memos into the public domain, and they showed a different story.
As I combed through those 44,000 pages of memoranda and other documents, I was shocked because it became clear that the FDA had been lying repeatedly since 1992, because they claimed that there was an overwhelming consensus within the scientific community that these foods are safe. But the overwhelming consensus within their own scientific staff was exactly opposite. These foods could not be presumed safe.
They urged their superiors to require long-term studies, but were ignored. Why? The person in charge of policy at the FDA was Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, later Monsanto's vice president, now back at the FDA as U.S. food safety czar.
What Monsanto and the biotech industry wanted from the FDA was a policy that created the illusion that genetically engineered foods are being diligently regulated, but that in fact imposed no burdens at all, that in fact had zero regulation. And the FDA has pulled that off masterfully.
So the same company, Monsanto, that told us that PCBs, Agent Orange, and DDT were safe, and lied, can tell us if GMOs are safe. In fact, they don't even have to tell us. They can put it on the market without telling the FDA or to consumers.
The FDA, the USDA, and the EPA are all responsible for different aspects of our food production, and they're signing off on this in a way that is, it's beyond outrageous.
They've appointed known advocates of GMO food to positions like Secretary of Agriculture, food czar, important positions in which independent decision-making should be done. And appointing people that work for the main offender on this to those positions is insane.
I think this is the most alarming thing that I have seen in Washington, that we would clear new, unique products for human consumption without careful, independent testing of these products. I can only think that money is the reason.
The American Academy of Environmental Medicine took a very strong position against GMO because such research as has been done is very disturbing.
The American Academy cited animal studies showing infertility, immune problems, accelerated aging, complications with cholesterol and insulin, and changes in the liver, kidney, spleen, and gastrointestinal system.
The biotech companies do their own research. I call it tobacco science. They use the wrong control group, the wrong detection method, the wrong statistics, and their feeding trials are so short they could never identify things like cancer or reproductive disorders or birth defects. They've got bad science down to a science.
No one has the right to play dice, to play roulette with the entire genetic integrity of life on the planet.